the speaker. His name is Dominique. He's with Roederer International and is going to talk to us not about champagnes, but about, I believe the subject, because it's such a broad subject, will be limited to the difference between California and French wines. Yeah. And we might have a chance to taste a few, and you out there in Zoom land, too bad.
Yeah, I mean, we are going to taste some.
We are.
Yes, you get to watch us. If you have wine in
those are dumping bucket for those who don't want to swallow. That's to dump.
I won't be dumping. I won't be.
I'll be swallowing.
Oh, there is Dominique.
Oh, it's on mine already? Oh, okay. My name is Dominique Moran. As you can tell, I am from Billings, Montana. Oh, no, really, okay. I'm from France. I'm born and raised in Bordeaux. Bordeaux, of course, is known for being the center of the world when it comes down to wine. But I'm born in the city of Bordeaux, not in the wine country. So, but it's close enough for the wine country, I guess. And I've been in Houston since 1986. So I've been living in Texas way longer than in France. I still have my French accent. I mean, I'm selling French wine, so it kind of helps a little bit. I don't see myself walking in an account and howdy y'all, you know, bonjour, comment allez-vous? That helps sell French wine, obviously. So when Evan asked me to be the guest speaker, yeah, what the heck, why not? I know Evan likes wine, I like wine, so let's try to share our passion with some people. So obviously the world of wine is very big. I mean, we need to find something to talk about. So we both agreed that we will talk a little bit about the difference between French wines and California wines. I'm not sure if you know that, but back in 1976, there was a big testing in Paris that happened. Anybody knows about it? No? Okay, in 1976, the wine industry in California was pretty much dormant. There was not much going on. And there was a British wine owner. He had a little shop in Paris. His name is Steven Spurrier. He's a master sommelier, master of wine. He talks a lot about champagne and wine in general. Anyway, he wanted to, in 1976, for the bicentennial of this country, wanted to do a celebration. And what a better way to do that than comparing some Californian wines with French wines. So in 1976, in March 76, he went to California and picked up, I would say, about 12 different wines, white and red. And that was his choice, what he wanted to show. So he went and he picked up some of the biggest name at that time. I have a list, my memory is not the best in the world, so I have to. But he brought in Stag's Leap, Ridge, Heights, Cellar, Clos-Duval, Mayacamas, and Frimark Abbey. Those were the red wine. And then on the white, Chateau Montelena, Chalon, Spring Mountain, Frimark Abbey, Veilchrist, and David Bruce Winery. Those were at the time. Of course, today, there are a lot of other wineries that are much more famous. But at that time, those were the top wineries in California, and mainly in Napa. And then he wanted to, for that, he brought some French wine, and we're talking about some big guns out there. Chateau Mouton Rothschild, Chateau Montrose, Chateau Haut-Beauséjour, and Chateau Léoville-Lacaze. Those were the four red. And in white, he brought some Clos des Mouches, Bonne Clos des Mouches, Bata Montrachet, and Puligny Montrachet. So those were really the top wine actually in France at that time. And they did a testing, blind testing, brown bags. There was one journalist an American journalist from the Times magazine, and then the rest were all French people. At that time, they were very, very big French critics of wines. And the funniest thing was an American winery won best wine. So that was quite something, because you imagine those French people. French people can be a little bit arrogant about their wine. I mean, I understand why. We've been producing wine for centuries. And, you know, you have that new kid on the block, Napa Valley, starting to produce wine, and I dare you, they are trying to get better or as good as us.
Right.
So anyway, Stag Lips won best red wine, and Chateau Montelena won best white wine. So those were the two Californian wineries that won the testing. It's called the Paris Judgment Day, 1976. So that's what put really Napa on the map since that day. Then, of course, some of the French critics said, oh, you know, yeah, they are great wine, but they won't last. They won't age. Well, okay. Now, in 2006, they did the same thing with the same wine. And guess what? Again, American wines won.
Wow.
So now you're talking about, it's not anymore a question of the Californian wine can age. They can age, no doubt about it. But at that time, they were not sure if the wine were able to age. But it did. So that being said, I thought it was a very, it was basically what launched the wine industry in this country. Now, you need to understand also, there is a little anecdote I need to tell you about. Back in the early century, in 1904, all the French vineyards were totally killed by phylloxera. Phylloxera is a disease that killed the roots of the vines. And in 1904, there was no more vineyards in France. So what did they do? The French decided that we need to find some rootstocks that are resistant to the phylloxera. And they found that nobody knows that. They found those rootstocks in Texas. So today, the wine made in France can say thank you to the state of Texas. Because all the vines, without exception, all the vines that are being used in France were originated from Texas.
Wow.
Because Texas had, it was through Texas A&M, they had some type of very resistant rootstock, and that's what we brought those rootstock back to France, and that's what we grafted them, and that's what now is resistant to phylloxera in France.
Wow.
So, you know, not too many people know that, unfortunately, and I'm trying to, because I'm in Texas, and I feel Texas on the heart, and I want to make sure everyone knows that, because it's a big deal.
Yeah.
You know, if it was not for Texas, France will have no wine right now.
Wow.
So it's something that we need to make sure people know, you know, it's very important. So now, what the difference between France and California? In France, the wines are named after a region. And I'm not talking about just France. In general, what we call about the old world. The old world, France, Spain, Portugal, Italy, all Europe. And then we talk about the new world being United States, Chile, Argentina, Australia. Those are called the new world. And the number one difference between France and the old world and new world, wine in the new old world are based on a geographical location. So, for example, Bordeaux is a wine coming from the Bordeaux region. Burgundy comes from the Burgundy region. Loire Valley, Champagne, all those are one region. So in France, for example, the government regulates what you can grow and where you can grow it. You cannot grow Cabernet Sauvignon everywhere you want to in France. That's a big no-no. You have to grow it where the government authorizes you to grow it. And Cabernet Sauvignon is mainly in the Bordeaux region. Now you talk Pinot Noir, it's mainly in the Burgundy region. Of course, there are a few exceptions, but it's still, again, regulated by the government. Now, in California, on the New World, wine are named by the grape or the property itself. Robert Mondavi or Jordan, whatever, those are names of people or wineries. Mm-hmm. In France, we do not do that. We name them after the appellation, the geographical appellation. Why? Because in France, we've been producing wines for centuries. So we know where the Cabernet Sauvignon or the Chardonnay are going to grow best. California is still a pretty new program. I mean, you talk about, in the early 70s, that's when they started, 50 years ago. In France, we are talking about several centuries. So we had plenty of time in France to learn where those grapes grow the best. So that's why the number one thing when it comes down to wine is Old World geographic, New World name of grapes on the label. Now, the second thing that is very different, I say France because that's what we're talking about today, but it has to do also with the old world. The climate, and generally speaking, in France and in Europe, can change from one year to the other like there is no tomorrow. I mean, you can be in a region of France in May where it can be 95 degrees, and the following year it can be snowing the same day. So those temperatures are changing immensely. It can change, it can vary from one year to the other. When you come down to California or the New World, the weather is pretty steady. I mean, there are no those big changes in temperature when you talk about California. That's why in California, wines are made pretty much every single year in the same way because there are no big changes. In France, wine can vary immensely from one year to the other, and it's normal. Grapes don't grow the same way when it's 40 degrees versus 90 degrees. Those are fruits, so they grow differently. And that's a big, big difference. And that's what we called the terroir in France. Because what the terroir means it's a combination of weather, climate, and soil. That's what you heard of the word terroir before, and that's what we refer to in France. We refer to a combination of weather, soil, and climate. Very, very important, because that's what gives the quality to the wine. In France, we feel like we make wine in the vineyards. We do not make wine in a winery. Now, of course, some people in California might challenge me on that, because when you look at French wines, for example, I look at Château Petrus, probably the best wine produced in the world. I mean, the starting price of a bottle of Petrus today is maybe $3,000 a bottle. So this is really the culmination of red wine. And I can tell you, not very many people know the name of the winemaker at Château Petrus. And we talk about the best wine in the world. Nobody knows. Why? For the simple reason that the winemaker is not important in France. What is important is how do you grow your grapes in the vineyard. And, the wine, Jean-Claude Berrouet, who is the winemaker at Petrus, told me one day, Dominique, wine is made in the vineyard. And me personally, my wines are made in the vineyard. The only thing I can do when I can mess it up, that's for sure. But if I follow what they are giving me, the wine are going to be always good because the wine is made in the vineyard. If you take a good care of your vineyards, and I mean by that, for example, when you harvest, you want to make sure the grapes are a certain brix, certain degree of alcohol, of sugar, degree of sugar in the grape. And when you harvest, you want to be the ideal amount of sugar. maybe you need, for example, a little bit of extra time and harvesting because you need more, a little bit of sugar. So in France, when you grow your grapes, you can choose when you are going to pick up the grape. If you need to hold on a few more weeks, we will hold on a few more weeks. Because for us, it's a passion. Now, you go in California, a lot of wineries in California might be a little bit different in the way that those wineries are owned by big companies. A lot of them are investment companies, and those companies cannot afford to not produce a vintage. So they have to produce every single year a vintage. In France, you will see properties where we do not produce something because the weather was not impeccable for it. And that's a big difference also, that we are in the wine business in France. You know, the vineyards are owned by the same family for centuries. Of course, I talked to somebody earlier about that, but unfortunately in the past 20 years, we see more and more foreign investment in France, companies, you know, from the eastern part, from China and things of that nature that are starting to buy the vineyards, because in France, we have a very rough law when it comes down to inheritance. Unfortunately, you cannot, when you own a vineyard and you pass away, in order to pass that to your family, the rates are outrageous. I mean, it's something like 70%. You need to pay 70% of the value of the property as a tax.
Wow. Wow.
So, I mean, this is impossible. So what's happening now is the family cannot afford it. So they are selling in order to pay for those taxes. And it's unfortunate, but that's what we see more and more in France. And I think it's going to happen pretty much everywhere. So that to me, it's heartbreaking because it changes the philosophy of the wine industry. I represent two wineries that were just bought out by some people from China. And I can see already a little difference. It's not the same. The philosophy of winemaking is a little bit different. And to me, it kind of breaks my heart a little bit because I'm a very old-fashioned when it comes down to wine business. You know, I've been in this business. I grew up in the wine industry. My grandmother had a little property in Bordeaux. So, I mean, I was 8 years old. I was already scumping in the vats, jumping on the grapes and things like that. So that's something I grew up with. And, you know, that's part of my life. And that is starting to disappear, basically. And it's unfortunate. So the very important things, of course, in France, after the climate, is the soil. The soil is extremely important. And that's why in France, we have the government regulating where you grow what, because in several centuries, they were able to learn what kind of soil gives the best quality grapes on the Cabernet Sauvignon or the Chardonnay or anything else. And that is extremely, extremely important to us. So that's basically, those are the 3-4 points that I want to emphasize on the difference between California and France. I mean, any questions so far? No?
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So how do you keep the soil consistent every year?
Oh, well, you don't really keep it. The soil has been there forever. So you don't.
You don't add anything?
No, you don't add anything, no. Actually, irrigation is against the law in France. And the reason being is very simple. I'm glad you asked that question. Because when you start to water the lawn, then you are making the grapes a kind of fat, a kind of easygoing. And you don't want to give that water. You want the grapes to work hard. You want the roots to go as deep as possible to fight for that water. And when they do that, they give you a much better quality. It's like a teenager. You give them everything, they are lazy. You make them work for something, they are not lazy anymore.
Okay.
And the grapes are very similar. You want them, some of our grapes, I mean, you look at some of those land, they have rocks, big
I
rocks.
know, I was there. That's what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
and
I
so
don't understand.
obviously you cannot, the grapes don't like that. So they keep digging and digging. And some of them go 30 feet deep, trying to find the water that they need to survive. And so
I was surprised at what poor quality it looked like. The land was,
but
and they were small.
They are
The
very-
vineyards that we visited, I mean, you're looking around, you're going, you know, like this is a vineyard because there's this big old stone house, you know, and there's all the, and then you've got, I don't know, maybe 20, 30 rows. That's it.
Mhm.
And you expect acres and it's not acres.
Yeah, I mean, the grapes are fruits and they need ultimate conditions to grow.
Yeah.
And the soil is extremely important. That's why you cannot grow orange tree in Massachusetts, for example. The weather, the soil, the climate are not good for it.
Yeah.
You can grow them only to Florida, California, southern Texas because of that,
Okay.
the quality that you get. So that is extremely, extremely important.
So they're on their own then. I mean,
They are
the reason
totally-
they're judged so severely, I guess, is because it's really the luck of the draw. They don't know what the weather's going to be. They
That's
don't know
exactly
what the
what-
conditions. And if they make an excellent quality, it's really a big, you know, it's like.
Of
wow.
course. So, you know, in France also, the majority of the good wineries own their own vineyards. In California,
They sell.
they buy grapes from
Right,
independent
And
growers.
that's that was going to be my question to you, is do they do that in France?
They do, yes. I will be a liar saying no. No, they
Okay,
do.
They do.
No. We are, for example, I'm going to this my company that I work for is Champagne Louis Roederer, Crystal Champagne.
Oh,
That's who I represent. And we own 80% of the vineyard used to the production,
okay,
but we do buy 20% of the grape from independent grower.
okay,
But what we do is we do not own those vineyards, but we manage the vineyards like we own them. So we take care of everything from for the growing season.
okay.
And that is like owning the
Like owning
property.
your own.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
like, you know, you rent an apartment, you do everything you want to in an apartment,
Right.
except you own it. You don't own it.
Right.
Well, the same thing here.
Okay.
We control everything. Our winemaker will go on the vineyards, talk to the vineyard manager, and tell them what to do. Even we don't own those vineyards because we know. I mean, the winery knows that the best. The grower company knows that the best way to grow, to give the best quality possible in those grapes. So that's what. We will buy grape, but the biggest names or the best qualities usually come from your own vineyards.
Okay.
And you know, it's like a chef. When a chef starts to have a little garden in the back and grow all these little spices, technically you get a better quality.
Sure.
And that's what the way we feel in wine. And that's why we produce wine in the vineyard, not in the winery. In the winery, the winemaker will tell you in France, we manipulate the wine. We do not make wine in the winery.
Right.
You just
It's true.
put together certain things. But if you have the greatest growing season, then you cannot mess it up.
Right.
It's very difficult to mess up a good wine from those vineyards, you know.
Right.
So how did California win then?
How? By the quality of the wine. See, the difference in wine is the Californian wines have a tendency to give you a lot of fruit flavors up front. That's something, and you know, we have wines here where we can, actually we can start to test
Okay.
if you want.
Absolutely.
Fruit forward is what it's known as.
Fruit forward, meaning, you know, when you put the glass to your nose, California, whoa, those are fruits. France, more mellow. It's French wine will be a little bit more elegant, I would say, not all fruits in your face. That's what California, and there is nothing wrong with that, but that's the way Californian wine are made.
Right.
But to give you some of those fruit flavors.
Well, didn't the tasters, the tasters don't know what they're drinking. Right.
They didn't know at all what they were
Apparently,
drinking.
they liked the fruit forward at that,
They
for
did.
that year.
No, they did, absolutely. But I think at that time, it was not as prominent than it is today.
Mhm.
I tasted some older wines from California, the Rubicon from Francis Ford Coppola and things like that from the 80s, and the fruit flavors were not as prominent than they are today. I think the what people like in today's world has
Taste has changed.
switched a little bit.
Yeah,
The taste bud
it's
changed,
changed.
and people, I think, taste more those fruit flavor. I mean, when you look at, for example, number one selling Chardonnay in the United States is what, Kendall Jackson.
Yeah, it's
I
a
mean,
popular one.
This is very popular.
Yeah.
What is it? A lot of fruits?
It's not, to me, very good.
Well, I can't say that, especially in front of a camera. I can't.
I can though.
You can say whatever you want, but I can't.
But one of the things that I've found is that somebody will say, it's when you pair, in a nutshell, when you're pairing it and what you're eating and what you're eating.
Mm-hmm.
So I could do a food tasting for an event,
Mhm.
and it's what you serve with it, whether they're going to, and how many times I've heard someone say, I went to this restaurant last night or a week ago and it was absolutely fantastic. And I went back this week and I had the exact same thing and it was terrible. Well, what did you drink with it? Did you change did you have a really good pairing the first time? Because then it can change the taste of what you,
Of course.
Yeah,
and I don't
Yeah.
think people really understand that and know that. So I've learned that in what I've done over the years. But I think that's important, is
That's
what
very
you're
important,
eating
yes.
with
You're
what
right.
you're drinking.
So Californian wines, generally speaking, are not really made to be drinked with food. I mean, you look in this country, anyone for happy hours are going to drink a glass of wine. Pretty much most of the time don't eat anything. They just sip on wine. That doesn't happen in France. We don't, in France, we don't sip on wine just like that for the heck of it. We
It's an
drink wine with
experience.
food.
And
You don't
have
drink wine
not
to get
water.
drunk.
You don't
It's
have
an
water.
experience.
No, but what I'm saying, that's very important.
It's an experience.
You know, wine in this country are meant to be drinked young and to be drink without food. And that's why the fruit flavor, the fruit profile are a little bit different than the French profile. Because the French wine are meant to be an accompaniment to the food. California are a little bit different.
Yeah.
And that's a big no-no. Now, when it comes down to match food and wine, the ABC of matching food and wine is you don't want the wine to overpower your food, but you don't want the food to overpower your wine. That's ABC. So knowing that, you can drink anything you want with any kind of food. You know, you can drink red wine with fish, but make sure that red wine is not a Cabernet Sauvignon, because that thing is going to blow away the food you are eating.
Something lighter.
Try to drink a red wine a little bit lighter, like a Pinot Noir. You know, maybe a little cool, but in that case, then you will not overmatch the food.
Correct. Yeah.
So that's why, generally speaking, you drink white with fish, red with meat, but it's not such a thing as written in stone.
Correct.
You can drink anything with any type of food, but make sure one or the other doesn't overpower.
Right.
And then you'll be fine that way, really.
Why did Texas have 1904? In 1904,
Yeah.
was the rootstock originally from France,
No,
or was it? Where was it from? And were they
they were from
making
the-
wine? Were they
they-
making wine?
Yes,
then, or
they were making wine in Texas.
Really?
And actually, A&M was studying grafting rootstock at that time
Where did it come from?
from Texas.
I mean, the roots. It was wild.
Originally, it came from Texas.
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
muscadine and the wine.
I don't exactly. I'm not sure where. I don't know exactly where. I would suspect in the College Station region. I would suspect. A&M has always been at College Station, so I suspect in that. But that's a fact, by the way. That's a fact.
So why does it seem, I've been to several Texas wineries.
Mhm.
To me, Messina Hoff is probably the better one out of all of them that I've
Well,
been
the
at.
most, I will not say the better one, but I would say the most well-known.
It is, but even when I went, I've been on about 6 different wine tours to different places. And for some reason, maybe I was already drunk by the time I got to Messina Hoff, but I ended up purchasing a bunch from them, and all the other ones, I was just like, it just, my palate wasn't excited.
Yeah.
Again, that was the last, but that was on one trip. Other trips though, every time I go, either they are really, really sweet or very
The
thin.
climate and the soil.
That's
And
exactly
I
right.
just, so I'm not a fan of Texas wine at all.
Well,
Only
you know
once.
what? You need to,
I think,
We have a question, if we could.
sure.
Okay,
Can you hear me?
Mary
Can you hear
Ann?
me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, man.
Okay, I was going to say, thank you for mentioning that. I have the Messina Hoff port, and we actually went to their vineyard. We met with the owner, and he shared with us that he is from the Northeast in the United States, and he moved down there, and he didn't think he'd be able to make it. He personally worked with A&M. A&M helped him. A&M also built the building that he is, I guess their architectural committee, or their students built the building there, part of the building for him. And he shared the same story that you did. Their number one is their port. And the port, he said, was because, I can't explain it like you did, because it was starving and the roots couldn't get enough water. And he said the Chardonnays, I guess, are not that good there. But the ports were very good, and he wins the award every year for the Houston Rodeo for the port.
Yeah.
So he did work with A&M, and they helped him get started and did all of that with him. Mhm.
When you talk about port, now we are not talking about wine. Port is a fortified wine. Port at one, port, you make port by very simply, you start like wine, and then during the fermentation, when you are done, you want to stop the fermentation, you add brandy in the wine, and the brandy kills the enzymes, bacteria, and just elevate the alcohol content to about 19.5%. So as soon as you add that brandy, you kill everything that is bubbling in that wine that is fermenting. So it is going to be on the sweeter side, but it's more a liquor to me than a wine, because you have brandy mixed with red wine in that bottle. And Messina Hoff does produce some very good port. Yes, I'm the first one to admit that. Yeah. But I have to admit, when it comes down to Texas, I think the best area to produce wine in Texas is in the Panhandle, around Lubbock. That is probably the best area to me. Maybe I forgot the name of the owner of Messina Hoff, might be challenging me on that one. There is another winery around Austin called Fall Creek. Very good winery. But to me, the best wine I tasted out of Texas come from the Lubbock, Amarillo, in that area. Yeah.
and it's so cold there, so that's weird.
But that because you need some cold weather. You see, in part of Texas, I was shocked when I found that out. In part of Texas, you can have 3 harvests in 2 years. Can you imagine? It's about that. That's quantity. That's not quality to me. But because of the weather, it's so different. It gets so hot that you can get up to 3 harvests in 2 years.
Wow.
So that's something unusual in a temper control region, like France or Italy or things like that, because the weather can be very cold in Europe. But in California, I don't see that happen very often. I represent some California wineries, and we produce every year, and I promise you the quality is very similar from one year to the other. When in France, it can be day and night. Even in Australia, same thing, very similar in quality. And the weather is very similar, usually. I'm
Are
talking
you
about.
familiar with South African wines?
Oh, yeah, of course I do. Yeah.
What's your opinion on them?
Oh, I love them. I went to Stellenbosch quite a few times, and they produce some incredible wine. Unfortunately, until 93, they were totally under, locked Nobody knew anything about South African wine. And I went, to give you an idea, when I went for the first time to South Africa, F.W. de Klerk was still president.
Oh, wow.
So that's a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I discovered South African wine in '93, and I was shocked by the quality. I mean, I represent some South African wines, by the way. I represent Meerlust.
Meerlust.
Oh yeah, that's yeah.
That's one of your dad's favorites.
And I represent Meerlust, and I represent also Fleur du Cap.
Okay, yeah.
So 2 big brands, and I used to represent some from Humphrey Detroit, big rugby player for the Springboks. I know very well about South Africa.
Did you go to Constantia?
Oh yes, of course.
Okay, that's where I grew up.
Oh, yeah. It's one of the most respected winery. Gross Constantia is one of the most respected
My
winery.
parents ran it for many years
Yep.
when I was a child. Yeah.
It's a great area. I mean, they are number 5 producer of wine in the world, South Africa.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Wow.
actually, they're the number 1 grape. I didn't know that, but it's Chenin Blanc. They grow more Chenin Blanc than anything else in South Africa. Yeah, but no, those wines are very good. They are because they were started by the Huguenots in the 1690, if I recall, something like that. So I mean, the Huguenots were persecuted in France, so they knew how to make wine already. It's not like in California where the wine industry started from people. They knew wine, obviously, but it didn't go all the way down to the 1600. It's just so. Yes.
Are the other old world wines so strict as France? Are the other old
Everyone
in
is
terms of irrigation and controls?
Yeah.
Okay.
Every single country in the old world is very regulated when it comes down to wine. I mean, you cannot add sugar, you cannot add that. We do not add sulfite. Let's come down there. Let's talk about sulfite for a second.
Yeah.
I mean, I keep hearing people, oh my God, I get a headache, sulfite and that. Well, you know what? Sulfite has always been used for wine, period. Sulfite is used to clean the barrique before we put the wine in the barrique to be aged. Sulfite is being used to clean those barriques. So you are going to have a few parts per million, but I'm talking about very minimum. Now, California, on the other hand, they discovered that sulfite can accelerate the aging process of a wine. So guess what?
They add it.
I won't even go there, but that's exactly what's going on. Hey, let's throw a little bit more sulfite, the wine age faster, and it can hit the market faster. Well, it's a different way. That's a way. We don't. Okay. Well, I guess my time is up.
But Dominique, thank you very much for being with us today. That's fantastic.
Yesterday.
Very, very interesting.